So you got here, you had $100 in your pocket and a place to live, at least for a little while, down payment on a place to live. Did you have any idea of sort of what finances you would need to be able to come to school? Did anyone in the bursar's office or anything walk you through? Sort of
No, I had no clue. I mean, I knew how much my housing would be, but I didn't have any idea how much school would cost until I got the first charge on my bursar, and then I was just like, how am I gonna do this? So it was because on the website they had the tuition estimator, but it's so complicated and I never understood it. So when that bill hit, I was just, because by the point that the bill hit the bursar and I could see it, I knew that I was making minimum wage, working 3 jobs, and I was eating ramen every meal, and there was almost no way I could pay for it. I knew that I would still try, but that it probably wouldn't happen. And I was 17, so I couldn't do loans without my mom's signature. And also, without my mom's signature, I couldn't fill out the FAFSA without her taxes, and she refused to give them. And so even with the, no, that wasn't yet. But she refused to give the taxes, which hindered all financial aid, most scholarships, because most scholarships you can't apply for if you don't fill out the FAFSA. And so I literally had nothing. But within a week of being here, I had 3 jobs. So I worked at Panera, and then from Panera, my trainer there got me a job at the farmer's market, and then the woman at the farmer's market got me a job in her kitchen. So I was working 3 jobs.
How was that balancing 3 jobs with your course load?
It was really hard, which I've never been a lazy person ever. I mean, growing up on a ranch, you really can't be. And so it was hard for me, but I knew that it was something that I wanted to do, and grades and studying have always been my thing. Mm-hmm. So the school wasn't the hard part. I loved that I was learning, and that college was so different than high school. I absolutely loved my classes, but working and doing that and figuring out how to get to work was one of the hardest things, because my mom wouldn't let me have my truck. Mm-hmm. So I was walking everywhere essentially and trying to find rides.
Was the bus helpful at all?
I didn't know that there was a bus. I guess I saw it, but I couldn't figure out how to use it. Being from southeastern Oklahoma, we don't really have those. And so still to this day, I couldn't tell you how to use it.
What kind of orientation did you have whenever you came to campus?
I came in the summer, so I started classes the day I moved in. So I didn't know what D2L was. I didn't know how to wear. I knew how to find my bursar bill, and that was almost it. So I didn't know that I could use, because all freshmen have to have meal plans, I didn't know that I could use that in 20-something. So I didn't know that I could buy toothpaste and stuff like that. So I didn't have any kind of orientation.
What about did you have an academic advisor yet?
Yes. But, and all of my advisors in the ag college, except for this one, have been absolutely amazing. But at that point, I didn't know how helpful they were, which I do now, and 2, he wasn't helpful. I mean, even if I would try to talk to him, he didn't have time or he wasn't there. And then later on in the summer, he told me to go to a community college, that I would not make it at OSU.
Why did he think that?
He said that I couldn't work as much as I did and make my grades. And he didn't word it like that, but to me he was basically saying, you're not smart enough and you can't pay for this. Which has been one of the things that keeps me, when I get really tired at 2 a.m. studying for finance, I remember, they said I couldn't do this, but I can. Mm-hmm. So. And all of my other advisors, I have a great advisor now. And I've never met or dealt with another advisor that would ever say that to any student.
So when you came in and you had 3 jobs and you were working, I think part of this is you got your first bursar bill and realized that 3 jobs at minimum wage was not going to be able to cover your bill for room, board, and classes.
Right.
What did you think your options were? What happened?
So when I got the bursar bill, all summer, even before I got it, I was in and out of financial aid, bugging the crud out of them. Always there. Anytime I had free time, I was in the financial aid office trying to figure out how I was going to pay for this and who could help me. And basically they were like, you don't have your mom's tax information, we can't help you. And it was just the frontline people. And I could never talk to anyone higher than the frontline people. And so at the point that I had done the math, I love math, I had done the math and figured out that financial aid was not going to help me, and there was no way that I could pay for I could not pay my bursar bill with working 3 jobs. It just wasn't going to happen, and they had put the hold on my account, so I couldn't enroll for the fall, which coincidentally also means that I would have no housing. I didn't have a vehicle. I mean, I had absolutely nowhere to go. And I mean, at that point, I didn't have a phone either, so I couldn't even tell my grandparents. And they don't have the resources to help me anyway, so it's not like they could just drive up here and pick me up. Mm-hmm. So the day that they put the hold on it and I was in the office and they said, no, like, we can't help you, that day is when I met Lou and Wes Watkins and Panera. So there's not really waitressing at Panera, but I was cleaning tables and bringing food out, and I love to talk. So I was talking to everyone, and so I was speaking with them. I had no clue who they were. Actually, I don't think I found out until like 2 hours later. So we were talking a really long time, and I was checked with my manager, made sure it was okay because they were really nice. And so I was just speaking with them, and Wes is from southeastern Oklahoma, so he says that he recognized my accent and kept talking to me about like where I was from. And I'm kind of like fuzzy on the details, but either I told, and I don't think I did this, either I told them that I couldn't pay for my bursar or they found out, which I don't think I would ever tell anyone that, just because that's the person I am. So somehow they found out why I was working so much, because they'd seen me at the farmer's market and stuff too. So they found out about my situation, and we continued talking. I was going to help them move and just stuff that I could do. And so one day, Mr. Watkins went with me to financial aid. And as soon as the people recognized him in the front line, they took me in like the back door where all the people that can actually do stuff are. And like after he didn't even have to really say anything or explain it or anything. He just had to tell them who he was, and they immediately wanted to help, which is great because he's a great guy, and I met them, and they're like family now, but I was fortunate to meet them, and a lot of people aren't. So after he went with me, the financial aid officer, Chad Blue, he helped me find a foundation scholarship that paid off the rest of my bursar for that semester so that I could enroll for the next one. And he ended up helping me again that fall semester because I didn't have time to apply for scholarships. And he also, in the beginning when I said, well, wait, that didn't happen yet with the taxes, the front line had told me that Mom didn't do the taxes, so it couldn't work. But Chad Blue said, well, there are other ways around it. Let me call and try to get the taxes, because my mom thought that I wanted her taxes for a different reason, that the school didn't really need them. And so he called, and several other people in the financial aid office called her and asked, and she just refused and wouldn't answer the phone and hung up on them. And so when they realized like this isn't really a normal case, they were very helpful. But getting into that helpfulness was very difficult. Mm-hmm.
So what were some of the things they did differently once you had their attention?
So, they were actually offering solutions instead of just telling me, no, you can't do that. So they explained, well, you can file for independent status, and these are the ways you can do it. We know that, and then they obviously were trying to get a hold of my mother and explain that they needed it, which they never would have done if I hadn't got past the front line. And so when they realized that she was actually not doing it, and was not supporting me, and then they helped figure out a way for me to get my independent status, based on other people's documentation, and history and stuff. So,
And you needed that primarily because you were a minor?
yes and no. I'm still in independent status right now, and I'm 19. So I needed that in order to get a Pell Grant. So I needed it to get loans if that was the route I was going to go. But I did not want to do that. I mean, I probably would have, but I didn't have that option at 17. So with independent status, that says that you're supporting yourself and you go off of your own taxes. And so that helped me get a Pell Grant and helped me get financial, like scholarships that are needs-based, which are most scholarships. So that's why I needed it, and I still have it. I reapply for it every year. I have to go through the process again, but they're still really helpful. So,
Did you have good grades in high school?
I would have been the valedictorian at Broken Bow. So I had straight A's there. Took all honors classes. I didn't even I took ag as an elective. But everything else I just took honors classes. And so at Broken Bow I did, but when I went to OSSM, it was so hard. I am not a naturally smart person. I'm a there are people that are just like crazy intelligent without studying ever, and I'm not that person. So when I went to OSSM, it was harder than anything I've ever had to do. I'd never made a B in my life, up to that point, ever. And so when I went there, I made a C in physics. But the physics teacher, on like the second day, he was like, you need to drop this class. You're not going to pass. I'm going to fail you. You cannot pass this class, because I didn't have the math background that everyone else did. And I was from the country, and all the kids were from the city. I mean, there was definitely a separation there. And so when people tell me I can't do something, that just like sets me off. So I made a C, which means I passed. So I've never been more proud of a grade than that one. So when I went to OSSM, it messed up my GPA. So I made like 3 A's and 2 B's and a C. And then at Hayworth, I made all A's. So everywhere but that school.
Well, that says a lot, honestly, for the science and math place to, yeah.
It was really difficult.
Be transparent. But I guess the reason why I was asking that is this reflection of, there's an indication that you would be a successful student here if given the resources and the framework,
right,
to be involved. So there's nothing there saying that you didn't work hard or weren't able to succeed or wouldn't graduate or. So, did you have to keep working 3 jobs?
Yeah. So all through freshman year, I worked 3 jobs. Even when Chad Blue told me, hey, we will make this happen. We will help you. You need to stay here. This and the Watkins and Bob Norris, several people in Stillwater by the fall semester were behind me. But even at that point, that I knew that it would be paid for, in some way, shape, or form, I still had that thought in the back of my mind that I still have right now, that I don't think I'll ever get rid of, that that it's not, well, they can say that, but it'll fall through. Mm-hmm. Or what if this happens and I have to live in my car again? Or what if? I worked 3 jobs all through freshman year, I ate ramen noodles all through freshman year. And it was all through freshman year. It was constantly, how am I going to pay for my next meal? How am I going to pay for next year? I don't know what I'm going to do, because I didn't have the security that a lot of students have, that, hey, my parents will at least give me food. If I don't have it, I didn't have that. So I worked 3 jobs all through freshman year. And now I work 2. So I cut out 1, which is nice. But and in that, a lot of people don't, like, my grandparents didn't understand it at all, because they said, well, Grandpa baled hay on the weekends to pay for his school, and you're working 3 jobs, like, why? So a lot of older people don't understand that at all. And you don't know if you get a Pell Grant until, like, into the semester. So if for some reason it was rejected, or one of the scholarships didn't come through, I would be up a creek. So I never knew until last April was the first time that I ever knew that my school would be paid for, or that I could pay for it. Because when you piece together scholarships like that, you never know until, like, September of the fall semester that you're going to have it actually there, which is super stressful. So.
When are you scheduled to graduate?
I am going to graduate December of 2016, so a semester early.
Okay.
Yeah. Super excited.
That's good. I bet you make it. So how did you find out that you mentioned that you didn't find out the Watkins were who they were until about 2 hours later. How did you find out?
Actually, well, I found out I guess they told me their names, but like 30 minutes into the conversation, I went and checked with my manager, and I was like, is this okay? There's nobody really in here, but I don't want to get in trouble, because I'm talking to them. And he said, no, it's fine. They're great people. And he didn't really say anything else. And so then later, they had spoken so much about Southeast Oklahoma, they never told me, like, what their significance was. And so later I called my grandparents, and I was talking to my grandpa about it, and I was like, hey, I met this guy, and they were really nice, and they talked about Southeast Oklahoma. Do you know who this is? Because they're in the same age range as my grandpa, and he was like, you did what? I was like, yeah, they were really nice. And then he explained to me who they were and how much of a significant impact Mr. Watkins has had on Southeast Oklahoma. And he told me that when he taught ag in Smithville, that he convinced Mr. Watkins to actually come down there. And so the next time I was in and I was speaking in church, all the old people that's kind of rude, but all the older people, my grandparents had told them that I'd met Mr. and Miss Watkins, and so they were so excited because they remembered the day that Mr. and Miss Watkins were in Smithville, Oklahoma, of all places.
Was that when Wes was in Congress then?
Yeah, I think so. So that's kind of when, so that night, I guess, after I got off work, he explained to me all of that. So, actually, I don't really know that they told me their names, because it looks like I would have recognized the building that, like, has his name on it or something. So, I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Well, and you and I talked a little bit about this, and I think it's an important part that sometimes people open doors in our lives, and that helps us succeed, but we shouldn't be required to rely on serendipity for success.
Absolutely.
I want to get to some other stuff, but I want to think about this for a second. If after having been through that entire process, just to be able to stay here, just to be able for the opportunity to go to school and complete it, from the situation you came from, are there things that if there was somebody else in your situation, how would you get the information that you have to them? You know, like, what do you wish that you would have had that would have helped you get the knowledge you needed to make this work?
I guess, because when, I mean, I think even if I had loads of knowledge, and I hadn't have had Mr. and Miss Watkins, I still probably wouldn't be here. But a lot of information would have been helpful. So knowing that there is a way, if your parents don't comply with the rules, to get around that, knowing that there are people on campus that will support you if your advisor or your parents or your grandparents don't, knowing that, I don't know, that not giving up is worth it, which I've always been that person that doesn't give up. Super determined and stubborn. But there are a lot of students that aren't, and that can easily be deterred simply by one person saying, hey, you should go to community college, you can't make it here. So I think other people knowing that it's worth it to go through all of that, to stay here and get an education and be a part of this family, would have been very useful. And other things like knowing how to work D2L, which they do in orientation, which when I got to orientation it was completely boring because by that time I'd figured it all out. But for people that start summer classes, knowing D2L, knowing that there are cheaper housing options and cheaper meal plans options would have been helpful. So, and how to use the buses, that would have been great.
How do you think you would have been able to find that information in the situation you were in?
Probably if I would have waited until like the fall semester when they have orientation, a lot of that would have been covered, like the technical stuff, like D2L and the buses and stuff.
But being where you were and not having access to the phone, having almost
Right.
school access to the internet, and
There's
a
no
librarian
way.
and a high school counselor, at some point, even from that perspective, how would you have found any information to just, like the cheaper housing, like the,
Right. I would have had to have a connection on campus. I mean, there's no way a high school counselor could know that about every college. But a high school counselor putting you in touch with someone at OSU would have been super useful. Which I guess maybe your advisors are supposed to do, like, be that person. But mine wasn't. So having a connection on campus, I think, would have helped with a lot of that information. But even if I had the connection, I didn't have a phone or internet, so it was virtually impossible.
You had internet, it sounds like, at school.
Yeah, at school, but you couldn't do like Facebook or like they have the restrictions on it. But yeah, I had the internet at school.
So if you had email and
Right.
things like that if you needed to.
Yeah, I never knew how important email was until I came here. I never really, the only reason I had an email address was to make a Facebook. And so when I came here, that's now all I use.
Okay. All right, so now that you're here, what are some of the things that you've done while at OSU, and what are some of the things you liked, and what are some of the other things that were challenging of just being a student?
I think my favorite thing about OSU is that it's not just a college. I've met students that go to other colleges that they go there to go to class and then they go home. But OSU isn't like that for me, at least. Everyone here, most people here that I've ever met love OSU. And there's a certain kind of family feel to the students and the teachers and the staff and the faculty. It's not, most people aren't just showing up here to come to a job and then go home, or to come to class and then go home. So that's definitely my favorite thing about it. I love the ag college, absolutely. I think that college in itself embodies that maybe more than others that I have taken classes with. So those are my favorite things. I think textbooks are like the hardest thing. Like knowing when to buy them and not buy them is pretty hard. Balancing work and school is hard as a student that doesn't have support, which once again I've never been a lazy person, so it's not as hard for me because I'm that super like I have to do this at this time and this at this time and this time, so I have like a really good schedule.
You're organized.
Very to the point that it's like obnoxious, but it's still really hard to balance that. And I think when you're in orientation, some of the students said that you can have good grades and money. There's like a triangle. Like you can have good grades, money, or friends. And I think that's very true. Like you choose two of them and then the other one's just kind of not there. So that's kind of been true for me. Working and going to school leaves no room for social life. And I mean, that's the sacrifice I have to make. And I value my education over social life. So that's okay with me. But some people choose the other way. So, and I guess as for things that I've done here, going to China is my like favorite thing to talk about that I've done.
Let's talk about it.
So, freshman year, the Watkins' son, Wade, works at NOC. He's like the dean of international studies or something like that.
At OC?
NOC.
Oh, NOC.
Yeah. So he had a study abroad that the Watkins really, really encouraged me to do. And they said, look, we can help you find scholarships. You can do this because I've always loved traveling, always. And I always have loved learning and exploring new things. So that was something I really, really, really wanted to do. But I thought that was only for rich kids and that I could never do that. Because I'd been in Oklahoma my whole life, 18 years. And so the Watkins encouraged me to do that. They helped me get a passport, which I'm the only person in my family that has a passport. And so that was a super scary process for me. And they helped me, like, enroll for this program. And after, I think I did that in March. Well, I got my passport, like, the day I turned 18. And so that was in March. And then in April, Dr. David Hannaberry in International Studies, he Facebook messaged me and said, hey, I heard about you through the Watkins. Do you want to set up an appointment with me? He didn't tell me what it was about or anything. And I was just like, okay, sounds fun. And so I went to his office between school and work, between one job. And I only had like 20 minutes. And so I was talking to him and he just told me that they were starting a program and they needed an American student to go to either China or Mexico and kind of be the recruiter and kind of give orientation to these students about Stillwater and about OSU and why they should come there and how they would benefit from coming there and kind of just facilitate that program and help it's through the ag college, so help the ag college where the program actually is and knowing what they can do to make these students comfortable here to make the program successful.
So what's the program?
It is, I don't know if there's actually a name, but it's an exchange program between Oklahoma State University, Ag Econ, and China Agriculture University. So within the program, the Chinese students can do 2 years there and then 2 years here and get 2 degrees. They're kind of still shaky on what the Americans can do. So I don't really know. I know that they can exchange really easily because all the classes are OSU, accredited, I guess.
In China?
Right. So I didn't have to fill out any transfer paperwork or anything because it was the same classes. Dr. Schatzer approves the syllabus and stuff that they use in China, and they were in English, which made me happy. So he told me all of this, and in my head I was thinking, one, I'll never have that much money, and two, I really need to go to work, because I had to change clothes and I wouldn't get to eat, and I was like, what am I gonna do? I really, really, really need to leave, because I just didn't think it was a possibility. I mean, I was really thankful that he considered me, but it's like, that's not a possibility. And I mean, living in a foreign country for a year, who does that? And so at that point I was like, yeah, thanks, I'll get back with you, and didn't think that I could do it. So I went on and I told the Watkins about it, I told Wade about it, and they really, really encouraged it a lot. I also talked to my grandparents about it, and they were like, no, because people here, what they know about China is that they're communist and the one-child policy, if that. So my grandparents were like, absolutely not, no. But the Watkins were very supportive. And so I kind of kept it in the back of my mind and was talking about scholarship opportunities for it and stuff. And then I went on Wade's trip and found out that I absolutely love traveling, and that is something that I want to do for the rest of my life.
What was Wade's trip?
NOCSE. So we went to 6 countries in like 3 weeks. We got 6 credit hours. And I had scholarships that paid for, I pieced together scholarships that paid for all of it. And so we went to 6 countries in Europe, and I loved it. That was one of my favorite things that I've ever done. And I realized I flew by myself, so we all met in Sweden, and so I went through like 4 airports to just get there.
Had you ever flown before?
No. Well, yes. I had flown to North Carolina to do summer classes at Duke when I was like 13, but I'd never flown internationally. I'd never been through any of that. I never had to use a passport. I'd never done any of that, and then I was in airports, like, the German airport scared me to death because they look so mean. Like, I know that's stereotypical, but they look so mean, and they didn't speak English with me, and I was like, I need help, I need to know where to go, and they were like, and they just wouldn't say anything, and so that was super scary. But when I finally got there and I was walking through the streets in Stockholm, I was like, I can do this. Like, this is what I want to do. This is what makes me happy. So when I came back from that, I was like, yes, I'm going to do this. We need to figure out a way to pay for it. I'm going to go to China, for a year. Well, no, I said I'm going to go to China. And so I still had the option of going a semester a year. And it was crazy trying to piece together the money once again to do that, because I would be leaving my 3 jobs. At this point, I'd gotten a job at a bank, a wonderful bank. I loved my job. Best job probably I've ever had.
What bank are you at?
Well, I'm not there anymore. First National Bank and Trust Company of Weatherford. I love that bank. I still go in there like every week. Because it's so small and people are so nice and it's like a family. And I get paid sick leave and paid holidays, something that I've never had. And so I was leaving all of the stability that I built. So that was really tough for me to decide to do. And so with that, I told several people, but the people that were helping me, that I couldn't do this unless they helped me pay for it. That I just couldn't. And so I don't think I knew until like 2 weeks before I got on the plane that the money would be there and had my acceptance letter and everything. So that was crazy. That was really, really stressful. But it was totally worth it.
So how did you all piece all that together?
The Watkins were very instrumental in it, again, because they kind of knew the politics of it, I guess. I mean, it was crazy because there were 3 different departments kind of helping me, but one didn't want to say how much they would help me until the other one said how much they would help me, and none of them wanted to say it like until the last minute possible. So it was just like freshman year when I didn't know if I could pay for school. I didn't know if I could pay for this until like the last minute possible. Until the Watkins were like, you have to tell her by this day or she's not going. And at that point I wasn't that person. I would never say that to anyone, because I don't know. I would never do that. But that's what had to be done. And so I got scholarships from the ag college for my plane ticket. And then I got a separate scholarship for just like study abroad. I wrote so many essays. So many essays. And then I got a Humphreys grant. And then I think that was it. Yeah, those three. And then my Pell Grant would apply because it's an exchange, a reciprocal exchange. And so all of my OSU scholarships that I had, like my Pell Grant, would apply anyways. So so the Pell Grant and the paying for my plane ticket was the big thing. Not the Pell Grant, the Humphreys Grant. So those were like the big things. And also, since I didn't know that I was going until like 2 weeks before, I didn't get to go through like study abroad orientation or all that. And I went this year to help with it and like encourage people to go to China. And I was like, this is awesome. And the kids were like, I'm so bored. And I was like, no, you need to pay attention. Because I was so sad that I didn't get that. Like, I didn't even know it was a thing until I was helping with it. But it's really cool. I wish I would have had it. But
what was helpful about it?
So they tell you, which I guess the woman in the study abroad went through like a binder of information really quickly, but once again I was between a job and class, so it had to be very compact. But they actually have a whole day where they help outgoing exchange students, and they talk about like getting bank cards and what not to bring, what to bring, safety things, like how to be more cautious, I guess. And then they like break off into groups, and you talk to people like me, like I talked to them about China specifically. So the people going to China came and talked to me, and then they had that for all the countries, which is awesome. I mean, you can't get a better perspective than someone that's actually done that as a student. So that, I thought that was really helpful. And they even, like, they have a segment for your parents, which I thought was really cool because, I mean, typical parents would be freaking out if their kid was doing that. Not really sure what's in that session, but I'm sure it's, like, calming fears. So, and then I was also on a panel of people that answered questions, and they were really good questions that would have been super helpful for me. So, yeah, I wish I would have done it, but...
When did your grandparents find out that you were going to China, for sure?
Like a week before I went. I didn't even tell my grandma that I was thinking about it. I learned about it in April. I didn't tell my grandma until August because she hates flying. She will not board an airplane or a boat. Like, she wants her feet on the ground. And she was having a lot of health issues with blood clots and high blood pressure, and so I didn't want to freak her out. So I didn't tell her. I talked to my grandpa about it because he's like one of the logical people in my life. So I talked to him about it, and I actually talked to an ag teacher from Hayworth about it, just because he was one of the ones that I didn't mention that like encouraged me to come to OSU. He has a daughter here, and so he was one of the ones. So I talked to him about it, but I didn't tell my grandma until August that I was even thinking about it. And so when they found out, they were supportive, but they didn't want me to go. And basically I had to say, like, you don't pay my bills, I respect you, but I don't really have to listen to you. I mean, I didn't say it like that, but that's how I had to think about it in my mind. And so I went and stayed. I quit all my jobs like a week before, and I went and stayed with them for a week, which was the most time I'd spent with them since I started school. And so when they brought me back, that's the only time I've ever seen my grandpa cry, was when, like, the last time that I saw them. And it was so sad. And at that, so I came back that evening, and my plane left at like 5 in the morning. And when they dropped me off at like 8 o'clock, I cried from 8 o'clock until I arrived in China. And I never cry. I'm not that person. And I was scared and I was stressed, and I saw my grandpa cry, and so I stayed the night with the Watkins, and they had a cat, so I was sick, and they were really nice. They never said anything about it. But yeah, I cried like the whole plane ride, which was like 12 hours or something. But it was interesting.
So when you got there, I mean, so the emotional toll, I mean, I'm hearing that. The emotional toll to just make the decision was huge.
Yeah.
And not having any real concept of where you're going.
Right.
That's a huge leap to take. Where do you think you found the courage to go through with it? Because it's a lot of, I mean, it's a lot of things that sort of are stopping. And you had the momentum.
Right.
But you could have probably pulled the brakes at that point.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I've always loved doing new stuff. I've always loved learning. I've always loved traveling. And so I knew if I could ever get there that I could do it. And also it was one of those things that in my mind it was like, you can't do that. And so that was like, I feel like that's bad to say, but that's definitely what drives me, is that when someone or even myself tells me that I can't do something, I'm just like, no, I have to do that. And so I thought, actually I thought if I can move to Stillwater by myself and figure out how to pay for college, I can move to China, it'll be fine. I don't know why that was rational in my head, but that's what I thought. And I mean, I knew if I ever got there that I could do it and I would love it. But getting there was the hardest part. And if my grandparents weren't here, I probably would have left in a heartbeat. I don't even think there would have been that huge emotional toll if my grandparents weren't here. And even maybe if my grandma wasn't so sick, because they really didn't know if she was going to make it. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do if my grandma dies and I'm in China? I can't come back. And so I had talked to her about it, and she was like, well, I mean, what are you going to do if you're here? There's literally nothing you can do. And she's a super blunt person. So it's probably worded like that. So, yeah, I had to let go. I mean, even if I'm in Stillwater, there's nothing I could do for them in Southeast Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. So I'm really glad that I chose to go. I can't tell you, like, the exact moment I, like, said, no, I'm doing this. Well, even when I was getting on the plane, I was like, nope, I want to go home. I'm done with this. So I think I was still wavering in my decision. And when I landed and I saw that huge city, and there were, like, no trees. Or there were trees, but they looked fake. And there were just people everywhere. And there were the biggest buildings I've ever seen in my life, and it's like, and then I got in my room and there were mosquitoes everywhere. My roommate had left the window open and the air conditioner on in the middle of the summer, and like opened the screen to the window, so there were mosquitoes everywhere, and she was gone for like 4 days. She knew she was going on a trip, and so it was like, when my roommate spolt, there's mosquitoes everywhere, I can't see anywhere that there's not people, I want to go home. So like the first 2 weeks I was super not okay. Well, that first day I had emailed Wade, and I was like, I need a plane ticket out of here, like now. And he was like, just calm down, calm down. So, but after that 2 weeks, when I stopped comparing China to America, I loved it. But I had to, first of all, learn how to do things on my own, learn how to use the subway system, learn how to order food by myself, figure out places that I could have my like peaceful time, which was parks, coincidentally, and then stop comparing China to the U.S. After I did those things, I loved it. I never loved the food, but I loved the place. So I'm absolutely really glad I went. And then I had to decide if I was going to do a semester or a year, and that was another super stressful decision. And so I couldn't decide, and then I booked a plane ticket to Cambodia. And that was like, you can't leave now. Like, you have to stay a year. That was my commitment. And I'm super glad I did that too. Every student that I talk to that's considering study abroad, I absolutely encourage a year, because you're just getting used to the culture in like 3 months, and you're just getting comfortable, and then you leave and you don't get to enjoy the awesome part where you're comfortable and you know what you're doing. So I'm really glad I stayed a year. I absolutely loved it. And I got to travel in Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. And so I backpacked by myself, and that one of my favorite things I've ever done. So
you backpacked by yourself through those countries.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any problems with that?
No, that was another one of those, like, super emotional things that I was like, I don't know if I could do this. What if I get, like, kidnapped or something? I didn't tell my grandparents until I came back. But, so it was, moving to Stillwater, moving to China, and doing that first backpacking trip were probably, like, the 3 most difficult decisions I've ever made. But I had Wade, who's been, like, everywhere, kind of, like, reassuring me. And so it was really scary, like, the first night. And I stayed in hostels. So I stayed in, like, a room with, like, 10 other people that I didn't know. And so the first night I slept with a pocket knife, like, under my pillow. And then ever after that, I was like, no, this is awesome. Like, all these people are doing the exact same thing I am. And the people I've never, ever gotten along with people my age, ever. I've never had friends. It's never been a thing. But the people that were traveling were so much like me. Like, we had so many similarities that I made more friends in that month than I ever have in Oklahoma. So I just absolutely loved it. And I was so scared. Like, I flew from Beijing to Cambodia, and I was super scared. I didn't know what to think. And I only had a backpack of stuff. And so when I got off the plane and I saw palm trees, I was like, nope, I'm good. I can do this. It was so pretty. I probably will never forget that view. Like, this, it was super stereotypical. The sun was setting, and there were palm trees everywhere, and the lady was really nice. There was no one around, compared to, like, polluted, tall buildings, lots of people in Beijing. So I absolutely loved it.
Did someone pick you up from the airport in Beijing?
When I first arrived there, the school sent a taxi that didn't speak English, and he had Elizabeth on the sign, and so that's my first name, but I go by Hannah, so I missed him, like, the first time, and he smoked in the car, and it was, like, a black car with tinted windows, like a super fancy black car with tinted windows, and so it was like, I'm getting kidnapped. Like, this, it's, like, taken. So, yeah, someone picked me up, and now that I look back at it, I'm super grateful for that. But it really scared me when I got off the plane. But when I was backpacking and stuff, when I would come back to Beijing, I would just ride the subway.
So this is Sarah Milligan with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. I'm talking today with Hannah McReynolds. This is part 2 of our interview. Our first interview was a week ago. Today's date is November 2nd, 2015. In today's interview, we will focus primarily on Hannah's time in China as an exchange student for OSU to the China Agricultural University. There's our context. All right, so quickly, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because we talked a lot last week about the obstacles you face coming to OSU, the sort of paths and navigations you found to get around them, the people that helped you along the way, some of the things that you found useful, and some of the things that would have helped you more. One of the things we talked about leading up to you deciding that you were going to go to China, and sort of the difficult decision in that, and the last minute back and forth on whether you were actually going to make it or not, and the fact that you got on the plane. Yay. One of the things you mentioned at that time, we also talked about you going to high school in a couple different high schools, but also the school for, I'm going to get the name of it wrong, science, math.
Oklahoma School of Science and Math.
Yes, Oklahoma School of Science and Math. I had a few questions about that because I know
Yep.
that you mentioned that was the only place that was what helped kind of dragged your valedictorian status down because you spent
Right.
2 years at the Oklahoma School for Science and Math, and that it was challenging. I had a couple of questions about that as far as your time while you were there. Do you feel like you have do you want to talk at all about your memories or your experience while you were there and how you got there and how long you stayed and all that good stuff?
I was actually only there a semester.
Oh, a semester.
So, yeah, I was at
Okay.
Broken Bow
just
for 2
remembered wrong.
years.
That's right.
And then OSSM for a semester and like a month of
Okay.
the next semester. I at first it was something that I wanted to do. So that I guess OSSM sends out like invitations to select students throughout Oklahoma, and then you have to go through like an intensive application process. And so at first it was something that I wanted to do, but after I viewed the campus and was told kind of what it was like, I was kind of not wanting to do that.
What made you not want to do it?
I obviously am a really independent person. And this school tells you what to eat, when to study, when to go to class, what you can do with your after class hours, like basically everything that you do in your life. And up to that point, I started working when I was 14, and I was 16 when I started that process. So I'd had jobs for 2 years. I'd bought my own food, my own clothes, my own truck, everything for 2 years. But when you go to that school, you can't have a job. They will not let you have a job. And you have to have your mom's permission to leave. You have to have someone physically come and get you to go off campus. I'm just a really independent person, and so it wasn't very appealing to me. I wanted to be challenged for sure. That was the appealing part to me, because I'd never been challenged in high school at all. And I knew that I would be there, but I knew that if I didn't have a job, how was I going to pay for things? And if you get into the school, everything's free. They pay for your food, they pay for your housing and stuff, because you live on campus. But my mom at that point was like, yes, you need to go. So when I think back on it, I think of it as she really, really, like, I was going to go. But her point of view is obviously different. She says that I wanted to go, so I don't really know. But the application process was extremely hard. They select like 80 out of everyone in Oklahoma to go. So you had to do an interview, you had to do a written application, and then a written application, an interview, and then another interview. And then you have to take some tests and stuff. But I got in, and so I was there a semester. And it was pretty much like I thought it would be. Like they told you when to do everything. I couldn't have a job, you couldn't have a cell phone. So you weren't really doing anything on your own. But I was challenged. I learned a lot, coursework-wise, but I think that it doesn't develop you any at all for, like, real life. But I at that point, I was in there, and I was going to stay because, I mean, I started it, I was going to finish it. So I started in August. I don't know what year, like 2012 maybe. And then January, my mom took me out and put me in a shelter. So I went home for Thanksgiving break, and we had issues, and she decided that she didn't have enough control over me, basically, because the school was in Oklahoma City, and I was at home, and I had to drive back and forth. I mean, she was at home, so it's like a 5-hour difference, and she couldn't really control me from that distance, so she didn't like that. We had it out, and she told me she could do with me what she wanted, and so then by January it had just like bubbled over, and she put me in a shelter, and that's how I ended up at Hayworth. So she actually wasn't going to let me go back to school at all. And then the people in the shelter were like, no, this girl needs to be in school. And so I don't think I started at Hayworth until like really late February. So I was out of school for like a month and a half or something.
Okay.
So,
So it wasn't your choice to
right,
leave
no, it
this
wasn't my
science
choice to
math.
leave at all. But, I mean, it put me here. I probably maybe wouldn't be at OSU right now if things had went differently. So,
Yeah. Well, we never know.
right.
Okay. Another thing that you mentioned the first time you'd been on a plane was when you were 13 and you went for a class in Duke. Do I
Mhm.
remember that?
Yeah.
What was that all about?
So, Duke has a program called Duke Tip. That's Duke Talent Identification Program. And everyone takes their ACT in like 7th grade as like a practice round or something. And if you reach a high enough score, then you get into this program. And within that program, you can take classes at Duke University your 8th and 9th grade year in the summer. And you just apply, and then you have to fill out a bunch of essays. But you have to meet the ACT requirement to get into that program in the first place. So I met the requirement, and I don't remember what it was. And then I did the applications, I got accepted, but they don't offer scholarships for it, so I really couldn't pay for it. But I knew I just started asking for donations and explained to people like what the program was and why I was doing it. And I ended up paying for the whole thing through people contributing. My mom never paid for anything. So.
And where were you living at the time? What community were you in?
Broken Bow.
That was when you were in Broken Bow.
Yeah.
Did you get anything out of it?
I really enjoyed it. I got scabies out of it. That was fun. So, it was my first time flying, and that was really scary. I did it 2 summers. The first time I flew by myself, and it was scary, but it was also fun because I like traveling. I like doing stuff by myself. And I met so many people because there were so many people my age that were kind of my intelligence. And so it was a really different environment than what I was used to. And I made really good friends that I still have today. So it was I don't even remember the class, honestly, but I think it made me realize like what I could be a part of. That there were people that I had more in common with than I had ever had before. So
Before you went to that program, were you already set in your mind that you were going to go to college?
yes. So college has never been. That's one great thing about my mom. College has never been a choice for any of us. I mean, since we were little, she was like, "You are going to college," which I'm the only one that did. But and I never really considered any other alternative ever. So
Was she supportive of you going to the Duke program?
yes. I mean, she didn't want to pay for it, but she wasn't going to stop me. And she was having so there's 3 of us, and so she was having issues with my sister, and so it was kind of like, I won't have to deal with her kind of thing, I think. So.
All right, so Duke. Did you ever think about going to school there?
Not after I got scabies there. As a 13-year-old, I was like, yeah, I don't really want to come back here. And we didn't have air conditioners.
Was that just something from the dorms?
Yeah. So I guess there had been an international camp or something before that, is what they told me. And yeah, it was I didn't know what was going on. It was terrible. But so after that, I mean, it was a really pretty campus, but I didn't really think I wanted to be there.
Got it. All right. So those were the holes in the timeline that you told us on last Monday. Or some of the spaces I wasn't sure how they reconciled themselves. So let's talk about China. The last week we talked, you outlined your choice to go to China, some of the support that you had to be able to get there, as well as flying over and sort of your first week and deciding you want to travel. But let's start with your class experience and sort
Okay.
of meeting your classmates and getting sorted out in the program itself.
Okay. So I was there for about a week before I started classes. And so we talked about that week. So when I started classes, I was the only non-Chinese person in the class, in all of my classes. So that was really fun. The teachers, all of them but one, were American or Canadian or some English-speaking country. And the majority of them were American. So that was kind of odd for me to be the minority. And the teachers, not really the first week, but throughout the semester, they would always, like, reference me, always. If they wanted to, like, relate something to life or something, it seemed like it was always pointed at me because they were using American references. So the Chinese kids didn't really understand them.
What would be an example? Do you remember?
So, like, if they would, I can't, so if they would, like, talk about, like, an American pop star, or in my speech class, talk about political campaigns or something, like, it's all stuff that the Chinese kids they're not going to understand it if you talk about Toby Keith. And I mean, I guess that they kind of wanted to give them more knowledge about America too, but it felt like I was always, like, looked at to answer those questions. And also being in our school system's a lot different than the Chinese school system. So in American college and even high school sometimes, the professors really encourage discussion and opinions in answering questions or asking questions, and that's not the case in Chinese school system from what I observed and what I've been told. So anytime there was a discussion, I was always the first one to say something, which happens in America too, but more there than it did here. And I was always the one that would ask questions, and the kids would even, like, come to me and say, "Hey, I don't understand this, can you ask him?" And so I would be kind of the one that would ask the questions because they don't think it's right to question a professor because they think that professors are of a higher class. And so they see, like, having a different opinion or kind of, like, questioning that teacher's opinion as disrespectful. And I don't. I mean, if you're doing it in a well-mannered way, obviously not rude. So that was always interesting. I just talked a lot, which I do anyway. But they really weren't used to that, and they're still not. So.
You mean now that they're here?
Yeah, now that they're here, I've actually had teachers comment to me that they just get massive amounts of emails from the Chinese students directly after class is over. So I guess they write all their questions down and then just email them instead of asking in class.
Do you think it's a language comfort barrier?
That might be it too. And I think it's more so here rather than in China because everyone else in the class was Chinese. So I don't know. And they were really scared of giving presentations too, which a lot of Americans are too. And we had a speech class, and they all hated it. I loved it. It was one of my favorite classes I've ever taken. He was an awesome teacher, and none of them liked him.
Do you remember who it was?
Dr. Zuckerman. Mm-hmm. He's David Zuckerman. He's from California, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I thought he was a great teacher. He really didn't like Oklahoma, but I thought he was a great teacher. But they really didn't like it because every class he had a discussion, and they came up to me after the semester and they said that, well, I worked really hard in this class and I got a B. And I said, well, you didn't say anything the entire class, and that's 20% of your grade. And so they didn't understand that participation was part of a grade, even though it was in the syllabus. They also didn't understand syllabi, because they also don't have those either. So they didn't understand, like, if it's in the syllabus, you have to do it even if the teacher doesn't remind you. Or there will be a test on that day, even if the teacher doesn't say anything about it until Monday and it's on Wednesday.
So what sort of system were they used to? How did they?
I guess the teacher tells them, reminds them all the time. They didn't understand the syllabi at all. So that was interesting to me. Which I guess when I came to college, I didn't understand how useful it was either. So, because we don't really use those in high school.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you were in class with all Chinese students. So there weren't any other ethnicities represented besides Chinese, and you
No.
was a white Caucasian.
Within the
Oklahoma.
OSU program, there were just me and the Chinese students. Within like the entire like ICB International College of Beijing, there was a Denver program that had Americans and Chinese people, and then another program within ICB was some European program that had like 2 Spanish kids and all Chinese.
Is
students.
ICB International College of Beijing?
Yeah.
Is that right? So did it ever come up, the fact that you're actually Choctaw?
It did, and that was really fun. They never learned about Native Americans, really. I guess one of their history teachers kind of mentioned it, but their history teacher was from England or something, and he was teaching American history. I don't understand that one. But they didn't understand it, and I was really white. So there was actually like a history fair kind of thing, and so I had like a map of Oklahoma and Rose Rocks from here, and I showed them like where the Choctaws walked from Mississippi and into Oklahoma, and kind of explained what happened and why it happened, or my opinion of why it happened. And so that I think that they thought that was really interesting. Some of them obviously didn't care, but to them, all white people are just white. So they never considered that I had any other background than just being white. And Chinese people actually have a lot of minorities that they don't really talk about. So some of the students in our class, there's like 2 that were of those minorities. They were way more interested in it, just to see that, hey, Americans treated those people bad also, because the minorities in China are severely persecuted. So that was interesting. And that within those conversations is when I found out that those students were not Han, that they were other ethnicities.
So China obviously has is widely known for issues with censorship and within their nationality or their nation. Did you have issues with that? Did you have any encounters with that sort of thing?
I had a VPN. Don't know what that stands for, but it's a thing that makes it look like you're in America or England or something when you're on the internet. And so, actually don't know that's legal either. But you just pay for a program and then you download it.
How did you find out about the program?
Wade Watkins had 2 former students that were teaching in China, and so they gave me lots of advice, and that was their biggest advice, was to get that before I went to China. And they explained to me how to use it and stuff. So more connections. And it worked really well. You just like download it on your computer and run it. So I could use Facebook. I could use Google and all that. My OK State mail was terrible because it's Gmail. So there were a lot of times that people would send me stuff and I wouldn't get it for days. And that's the internet wise. So I never was never in trouble for it. I went to church. I never got in trouble for going to church. One of the students is Christian. But there are a lot of stuff that the students won't talk about. So that's more where I saw the censorship. I never encountered somebody telling me to stop. Well, the students were like, we don't talk about that. But I never was in trouble, I guess. But the students won't talk about Tiananmen Square. They won't talk about anything political. They would never say anything bad about their president. They would never say anything bad about our president or any leader figure. They just don't talk about it. So. that was actually one of my more memorable experiences. No one ever told me not to talk about like the 3 T's, Tiananmen, Taiwan, and Tibet. And so the first like rattle out of the box, some of the students took me to Tiananmen Square. And there were so many people there. I don't know if it was a holiday or if it's, well, I guess it's always like that. But so we waited in line, and we finally got in there, and we were in like the square, and they were telling me all this great stuff about Mao Zedong and all this, how he was an awesome person. And I was like, yeah, what about the people that died here? And they were like, nobody died here. And I was like, no, yeah, people died here. I was reading about it last night, and I was obviously being loud because I'm a loud person. And so they were like, no. And then one girl was like, we don't talk about that. So I was like, okay. So that was interesting.
It is interesting. Do you think that your experience with that would have been different if you would have been in a more international school?
Probably. I mean, I would have known more about China if I would have been in a more international school. But and even if I had had the opportunity to go through like the study abroad orientation, I would have known that because they go in depth and stuff like that. But since it was so rushed and fast, I didn't get that opportunity. So, but I mean, it's something that I'll never forget. So, and no one was harmed. So,
right. Did that translate into the class in obvious ways?
Like what they would talk about wise? Yes. Which most of my classes with them were like money and banking and accounting and stuff. But with the speech class, it was for like the speech teacher actually said, well, I've given presentations in blah blah blah, Taiwan and China. And a student went off on him and was like, that is part of China. You have only given presentations in China, and was really, really upset. And so that was interesting. And they won't talk to Japanese people ever. Kids my age will not talk to Japanese kids our age. And there were some on campus, and they were just like excluded from the Chinese students. And if you ever mentioned like anything with Japan, some of the students would get really upset. So,
was it explained to you what was going on?
Because of World War II. Okay, my history's a little shaky. They think that all Japanese people are terrible, because of what happened in World War II. So, and even here, one of the students here, we went to a hot pot restaurant, and the waiter was like making a joke about like Chinese and Japanese will be friendly in America or something, and the girl got so upset and like left. She was like, that was not okay. I was like, he was just making a joke. So
she was upset at the inference that she might be friendly with a Japanese person.
Yeah. So that was interesting.
Did you ever have any interaction with some of the Japanese students?
Not really. They kind of stuck with themselves. So I talked to one about food, and that was it. And all the other international students, besides the ones that were in the European program and the Denver program, were all graduate students. So we never crossed paths really, and they lived in separate housing.
So was you mentioned this a little bit last time, but I don't think I really got a good sense of it. But you lived in the dorm,
mm-hmm.
And I remember you mentioning you had a roommate.
Right.
How did your relationship with your roommate go? And was she Chinese? Right.
Yeah, she was Chinese American, or American, whatever. She was American. No, she wasn't. Okay, so she was born in China, but she was adopted when she was like 6 months old, and raised in a very wealthy family in Denver. So when the Americans go to China, they live in a dorm, but they only live with other Americans or Europeans. So they have international housing, but they won't let the Americans or the Europeans live there. So we had to live by ourselves, and there was only like 12 of us.
So all the American students in any programs were all in one
Yes.
compound sort of thing?
Yeah, and so we lived on the first floor, and the teachers lived above us. The American teachers lived above us.
Okay.
It was really weird. At first I was so upset. Like, why did I move to China to live with other Americans? And then, so my roommate was from Denver. She was really wealthy. Like I guess I said in the last, but the first day when I came in, like, the window was open, the screen was open, the air conditioner was on full blast. And automatically I was like, I'm not going to get along with this girl. And she was just, like, she would stay up all night. She never went to class. She was there to party. Like, she wasn't there to learn. And we're just really different people. So.
So you said at first you were upset because you were segregated. At some point, did it become okay, or did it make more sense why you were in an American compound?
I don't think it ever made sense. But I think if I wouldn't have known what my option, like, I had the option to have a better room, then I would have really appreciated being in the Chinese dorm. But they live 6 in a room, in like a traditional sized dorm here. 6 people in one of those rooms.
So like just bunk beds?
Yeah. Bunk beds. They don't have closets. They have 1 drawer apiece. And it's just bunk beds with a desk underneath it. So there's 3 beds on one wall, 3 beds on one wall, and that was it. They had to walk to take showers. Like, walk, like, from here to the road. So, in the dark and in the cold in the winter. And the girls did. The boys didn't. The girls did. So that upset me. And they lived in like a 20-story building, and the elevator was broken all the time. And so at first I was like, well, I'd be getting the real experience, but then I was in my room and I had a terrible roommate, but I was 2 people in a room of the same size and had my own bathroom, had my own shower, had access to a kitchen. And they didn't. So.
Why do you think that there was such a disparity, even between the Chinese student, male and female students, and the Chinese students and the international students?
Between the male and the female, I don't know. I asked that question a lot. And the more honest people, I guess, said that it's always that way, that boys are, like, on an upper level. But then other people, like, there were rumors and stories and stuff about how in the dorm that the boys lived in used to be the girls, but then someone, like, killed herself in it, and so they moved the girls to the other dorm, and, which none of that seemed real to me. It seemed more likely that it was just because they were boys. So that, yeah. And with the Americans versus, like, the international students, and even the international dorms were better than the Chinese dorms. They were basically the same setup as the American dorms, just with more people. Not in the dorm, but, like, more people in a building. I don't know. We had, I was really close to some people from Cameroon and Ghana and different countries in Africa, and they had, like, been really, really upset about why we were separated, which, in all honesty, is reasonable. I mean, why are the Americans separated? It doesn't make sense to me at all still. But they said that they found out that it was safety reasons. That's what they said. So I never really knew, but it kind of made sense a little. But then, like, they were all guys that I was friends with, and they said that America has basically made a lot of people mad. But then I was like, I am an 18-year-old from nowhere, Oklahoma. Like, no one would care if I got kidnapped. No one's going to give you any money. And they said, well, they don't think about it like that. So, I mean, we had our own security guard and stuff. So, I don't know.
So maybe security.
Yeah.
So did you spend a lot of time with Chinese students, or sort of a mixture of that? And you just mentioned having friends in Ghana.
So the first semester, I spent more time with the Chinese students. I went to several students' homes. I went to several people's homes, went to different places in Beijing with several of the students, and they were really nice. I think by the end of the semester, though, they were kind of like tired of having to play tour guide to this American girl. And traveling with them was kind of hard because they just assumed that I would know stuff and I wouldn't, and so I asked lots of questions, and I think sometimes they got tired of that. So by the second semester, when I came back from my trip, I still went to class with them and ate dinner with them and stuff, but I didn't travel with them at all. In the second semester, I traveled with the American kids. And both semesters, I went to dinner and did stuff with international kids, mainly people from Africa. I had one friend from Indonesia and one friend from Pakistan. So those were really interesting to me. When I told my grandma I was like going to eat with a girl from Pakistan, she was like, no. And I was like, Grandma, please. This girl is 20 years old. She has nothing to do with anything you're thinking about. So that was, and the girl from Pakistan actually, she was the only female that I have yet to meet, like today, from Pakistan. I've met lots of males from Pakistan, but not females. And I asked her about it, and she said that females are 75% less likely to leave the country than males. So she is really kind of the exception, and her family wasn't really happy about it. So it was interesting.
So how did she choose to go to China then, do you know?
I don't know. She never really got into it. She said that her mom didn't want her to go, her grandparents didn't, but her dad did. And so I assume she came from a wealthy family and her dad helped her. But she was really sweet. She had the very different outlook on a lot of things. So,
how did you meet other international students?
I met her on like a trip to the Great Wall that kind of ICB had for all the international students. And then the students that were from different countries in Africa, they would just come up and talk to me on campus. So that they are what I wish Americans were like. And what I wish I myself was like. They would just see me walking by myself and just come and talk to me. They never thought like she's going to ignore me or she's going to be upset. And they did it, I mean, it wasn't just because I was a female and they were male, because they did it with the other American boys too. So I wish more people were like that.
What did they ask you about? Do you remember?
They asked me where I was from, obviously, like that's the first question everywhere. They would ask me about my family, brothers and sisters, and then they would kind of ask me like why I was in China and not at home. Most of them were kind of the opinion that I should be at home, so I would have gotten along great with my grandparents. And then they wanted to compare the cultures, so they would ask me like, well, when you're dating someone, what do you do here versus what we do here? When you have kids, do you have to be married? Because I would always talk about my niece and nephew, and my sister's not married. And so that would just start a whole conversation. So what kind of food do you eat? What's your favorite foods? A lot of the questions. How does China compare to where you're from? Stuff like that.
So why did they think that you needed to be home?
They two of them I was closer to, they thought that was a woman's place. Like that was their thought. They said that no one from their home, like no woman from their home would do what I was doing. And they were almost like upset that I wasn't married or dating someone. And so, not that they wanted to date me, but just because I should be doing that by now.
But yet they were, you still consider them your friends?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't say it in like an offensive way. I just thought it was really interesting to see the different cultures, or even to see how much that aligned with my grandparents' cultures. So it was really interesting, some of the conversations we had, just to see how different everything was.
Mm-hmm. So. Were there things that surprised you? Were there other things that surprised you coming from Oklahoma to China? Like, you talked a little bit about sort of when you got off the plane and realizing you were being in a city, but did you acclimate okay, for example, to being in a really huge city for that period of time?
I think that I did, but I also think that I didn't. I mean, I was okay. I was fine. I was happy most days, but just like anything else, like you have your down days. It was really hard for me to find stuff to do in a city for me, because I was so used to being in the country. So I would find myself thinking like, wow, I'm bored, and then I would think I'm in China. Like, this was second semester, not first semester. And then I would think like, I'm the luckiest person alive, and I'm saying I'm bored. And I could hear my grandma's voice in my head saying, like, intelligent people are never bored. So then I would just go and start walking. And I did that a lot through both semesters. I just walked and saw everything. So I think I did okay, kind of getting used to being in a city. I don't think that I would ever want to live in a city like that for, like, 10 years. Just because there were so many people all the time. All the time. You could never get away from people. And it was really dirty. Really dirty. So that kind of, like, stereotype about China is true. Well, there's some truth to it. So.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you went to church while you were in China. How did you find a church community, and what was it like?
Well, one of the students took me to church to, like a government-sanctioned Chinese church. So there are there are international churches for international people, and then there are government-sanctioned Chinese churches. And so those two different types of churches were completely opposite. When I went to the Chinese church,
so like a Christian church?
Yeah, it was Christian. We waited outside for like 2 hours to get in. There was a huge line. Like, you had to wait in line because the seats would fill up, and then there would be another service later. And so you would just wait in line until you finally got in.
Was it a big building?
It was a big building. I would say that there were like 200 to 300 people in there. And even when we left, there was still a line of mainly Chinese people. And they would check their passports and stuff. They didn't check mine because I was white, I guess.
Why would they check their passports?
Or maybe it's like their ID card thing, because I don't know. I just saw them do it and thought it was weird. I have no idea why.
Check your ID before you could go in.
Yeah. So I only went to that one once.
What was the service like? Was it in Chinese?
It was in English. The preacher was Chinese, so it was kind of like hard to understand him, which is one of the reasons I didn't go back. And then the second reason is that it was all out of the Old Testament. It was all law. And it was all before Jesus. So it was like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. There was nothing about love or grace or anything like that. So I kind of felt I didn't feel like it was what I wanted to be learning.
So what type of church did you or do you go to here at home? Is it an affiliation? Is it a New Testament denomination?
I was raised in a non-denominational. Mm-hmm. My grandpa was a preacher. But I was raised in a church where it was more of a discussion. It wasn't like someone standing up there shoving the Bible down your throat, I guess. So I don't really go to church here because I haven't found one like that yet. Mm-hmm. But it was, I mean, any of the churches that I've ever gone to have been, I mean, if they teach out of the Old Testament, they relate it to the New. So I was raised with, like, the main part of my beliefs being based on Jesus died on the cross for me. And that church didn't ever say Jesus in any of the sermons. So, yeah.
So you went to the government-sanctioned Christian church, one of them. And that was really heavy old.
And it came out in the Chinese people that I talked to that were Christian and were open about it. Even the girl that's here, she would say things like something like, I kissed a boy, I'm not a real Christian. Or I said a cuss word, I'm not a real Christian. Or you said a cuss word, you're not a real Christian. and I was just like, I mean, that's not what I was taught. That's not what I believe. So it was very evident that that's what she was raised with, and all the other Chinese Christians that I talked to, that's what they were raised with. So, and there are people here raised like that too, but it was very overwhelmingly that way there.
So what was the difference between the government sanctioned and the services that were international?
So the international church was awesome. It was great. It was predominantly people from countries in Africa, and they have amazing music. I love their music. I've always been a fan of worship, but they just blew it out of the water. And they were, and it was taught some New Testament, some Old. They kind of cycled their preachers, like they would have, because I guess people leave and come and go. So it's kind of different all the time, but I never felt like that they were just teaching law, like I did with the other church. And the people in that church, I felt more welcome there. And because most of the people were from countries in Africa, they just had a completely different perspective. And they were so welcoming and loving, and they would talk to you just out of nowhere. I went by myself a couple of times, and there would always be someone that would come and sit with me. And it was predominantly people from countries in Africa, but there were also people from the UK, Ireland, different places. So.
Were Chinese nationals allowed to go to that church?
No. I saw a few, but I don't know. They set, like, on the bottom of the bulletins, it says, like, passport is checked out the door or something, but I was never checked. They checked it at Christmas. And then the people that had gone to the church regularly said that they check it on all the major holidays. But
to make sure that you're not Chinese.
Yeah, so.
How did that make you feel?
I just saw it as another way that they're censoring what people in China learn or know, or have access to, without censoring international people. So without offending international people, they're still having their grip on censoring Chinese people. So.
Did you ever talk with your friends, your Chinese friends that you knew were Christian? Did you ever talk with them about the difference in services or the services that you went to?
I did. One girl that's here now, I talked more intensively with her about it, and she just, and I tried to explain to her about, like, Jesus and, like, this is why he died on the cross, like, and grace and love, and she just said, well, that's not what a Christian is. A Christian is you do this and you don't do this and you do this. And so she was very set in that. So we never, like, crossed. Never came to, like, a meeting of the minds. But she's going to a church here. I haven't talked to her about it since then. Like how she compares the two. So
that will be an interesting conversation. Well, so what else did you do while you were over there? I know that you talked a little bit about traveling on your own, which is really impressive, through Vietnam and, do I remember Cambodia?
Cambodia and Thailand and Malaysia.
Right, in Thailand and Malaysia. So we talked a little bit about you doing that. Is there anything else that you wanted to add from that trip? I think you talked more about staying in the hostels and backpacking and the independence and the camaraderie, as well as the fear going into that. Or did you have a favorite place?
Cambodia or Malaysia. Cambodia, when I first went into the country, I went to see Angkor Wat. Like, that's why I, chose that place, is because I wanted to see that. And when I got there, I met the girl from Scotland in a hostel, and she said, well, you have to go to Phnom Penh and go through the killing fields. Like, you have to do this. And I was like, don't know what that is, and so I started Googling stuff, and so I went through, like, you put a headset on and you walk through this field, and it makes you stop at key points or whatever, and it tells you about Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge and what the people of Cambodia have been through. So I had been in Cambodia for a week before I did that, or more than a week, for a little bit. And before I did that, all I could think about that entire time was how nice these people were, how giving and caring and how helpful they were. And then I went through that and learned about that and saw the pictures and saw the bones, and it just put a whole new perspective on that these people could go through that. People that I was talking to that were like my mom's age had lived through that, or my grandparents' age had lived through that and so much more, and realizing that they had gone through all of that and they were still that content and that happy and that helpful. That was really because there are people in America that drive like a car that is worth more than those people will ever have in their entire life, and they're not happy and they're super not nice. So to see those people be able to make the most of their life when they have nothing. I really loved Cambodia. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful too. But it was more about the people. And Malaysia was the same way. When I went there, I didn't actually mean to go there, but I ended up there. And I had never really been around Muslim people ever. And I was brought up to think that Muslim people were terrorists. And so when I went there and I got off the bus out in the middle of nowhere, this Muslim lady came up to me and she said, "I'll help you." And I was like, this woman's gonna like kidnap me. And now looking back at it, I'm like, I have like 100 pounds on her. Be fine. But she took me to like 5 different places to try to find me somewhere to sleep. She let me use her adapter. She introduced me to her children. And within the time that I was there, we became really good friends. And that woman in herself changed the way I look at Muslim people. And I had never, in my mind, I had never thought that I had thought that all Muslims were terrorists. Because that was never okay to me. But when I landed in this country and that woman said that to me right getting off the bus, and my automatic reaction was, she's going to hurt me, then I thought, wow, like this was in my subconscious.
So when you got off the bus, she identified herself as a Muslim?
No, she had I don't know what you call it, like the head stuff on.
Oh, a hijab?
Yeah, hijab. Yeah. So, and then we talked about religion, and on the similarities and differences that we believed in. She was really open about it. So, it was really interesting.
So why do you think that she approached you?
I don't know. I was by myself. I was the only girl in the van. I didn't have anywhere to stay. I was kind of just winging it. So I think that was it. And we just started talking, and we were the only 2 women. So there were Malaysian men everywhere trying to sell people stuff. And they were getting off this bus or like minivan thing. And so she was like, don't buy anything. So I was like, okay. And she just kind of like took my arm and took me away from all those people and said, we can go look here and here and here to try to find you somewhere to stay. So, and that was, she lived right outside the oldest rainforest in the world. So I went through the rainforest and stuff, and that was one of my most memorable things. And then Angkor Wat and the killing fields in Cambodia. Vietnam, going through the Chi Chi tunnels, like where the Viet Cong soldiers hid, and learning, or just kind of walking through there and thinking like of all the people that I know that were in that war and how they must have felt coming from southeast Oklahoma into this like jungle. And coming from being raised with like kind of like you don't shoot people in the back, and then this tour guide telling us that they like set booby traps and showing us the traps, like sharpened bamboo with snake venom on the points, and showing us where they like dug holes and covered it up where the people would fall in, and then the soldiers would just pop out of the tunnel and shoot the Americans. Didn't tell anyone I was American. So that was really interesting. I was the only American in the tour, unless someone else was hiding it. And then
Did you think they assumed you were, or that you were
I
either
don't know. I
British,
said I was from
Canadian, or-
Canada.
Okay.
So I don't know. I kind of like stayed in the middle of all the people, because you could like the tour guide. You could tell that there was resentment there. So and Cambodia, I saw it too. Because I didn't know this, but part of the reason that Pol Pot had so much control over the Cambodians is that Cambodia was being bombed, like, I assume on accident, I don't know, but Cambodia was being bombed by America. And so the people were like fleeing the countryside and going into the city, and that's how Pol Pot had more control, is because he said, we'll keep you safe and move you here. So there was that. And then I went, I don't know what you call it, like I walked down like a giant waterfall backwards, like hanging onto a rope.
Rappel?
Yeah. And so I did like an 80-foot waterfall. And then this, like, we did 4 waterfalls and we jumped off cliffs and stuff. And it was so much fun. That is one of my favorite things I've ever done. Like, I was scared to death when I was doing it, but it's absolutely one of my favorite things. I'm really glad to get out alive. And then scuba diving in Thailand. So those, like, you have a main point in, like, all your trips, and those were my main points in those, I guess.
And then you started your second semester in
Yeah.
the university after that trip.
Yeah.
So, as you're nearing the end of your time in China, what were your feelings?
It was really difficult for me to figure out what I felt because I really wanted to go home. And I don't know, well, I do know, I was so tired of the city. I was so tired of people constantly being around me, having everything that I did, like, have to be explained, like, 6 times, not having the food I wanted. That was the main thing, like, was not having the food I wanted. And then, I don't know, and I missed my grandparents like crazy. So I was ready to come home.
Did you talk with your grandparents on the phone, or?
I did. I Skyped my grandparents every Saturday. So if I didn't Skype them, they were super upset. Like, they thought I was dead. So I talked to them every Saturday, but it was always, I think it just made me miss them more, being able to talk to them. And that was really, really hard for me. When I was younger, my mom would go through periods where she wouldn't let us talk to them at all. And so after I turned 18, I thought that I would never have to go that long without seeing my grandparents again. And I did. So that was really hard. The food and my grandparents were like the hardest things. So I think I was ready to come home, but I wasn't ready to be back in America. And like a week after I came back and I saw my grandparents, I was ready to leave again. So that was interesting.
Explain that a little bit. You weren't ready to be back in America.
I don't know. America just, I knew that when I came back I would have to deal with family drama, and I would have to continue figuring out how to pay for school, and I would have to kind of like be back in the real world, or my real world, that's just full of trouble. I mean, that's what America is to me. Like, not as like a whole, but in my life, it's pretty much been just struggling.
Is that home, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you gone anywhere else since you've been back?
No.
When did you come back?
I came back in July.
July 2015?
Yeah. And I'm going to Costa Rica in December, and I'm super excited. So, but it's hard for me. I'm like so tired of being here. Because I just...
It's been 4 months?
Yeah. I was like done after a week. Because I go to school, I go to work, and I go back to my room. And everyone understands what I say, which, it's something that I wanted to be back to, and now I hate it. Like, there's no challenge in doing anything. I mean, my finance test was hard, but I didn't have to struggle to order dinner. So it's just like, there's nothing new, I guess. So.
Speaking of struggling to order dinner, how did you, let me think. How proficient was your Chinese by the time you left?
So Chinese is super difficult. So I can still carry on conversations with the Chinese students. They always answer me in English, but so I could get by. I could not write. I can write like 10 characters. I can write in pinyin, which is like English alphabet letters, but not characters. So I couldn't write, but I could speak enough to like order dinner and find food and carry on conversations. Which the Chinese students say that my Chinese has improved more since I've been back than since I was there. But they didn't really talk to me that much like the last month that I was there because they were getting ready to come here, and so they had so much to do that we never, other than in class, we never really saw each other.
So your classmates in China are now the same classmates that are here?
Right, yes ma'am.
So I guess logically I knew that, but when I heard you talking about them sort of tour guiding you around your first semester there, are those the students that you're tour guiding around now?
Yes, yeah. And I can definitely see where they got tired of it. So I love helping them, and I really enjoy showing them America and the way we do things, but some days, like, you just don't want to have to explain yourself 4 times. So you just have to kind of, like, have your moments of peace and then go back to helping. So it's really fun. I think they really like it here. They hate the food, which when I was in China, they made fun of me all the time because they would ask me, like, what do you miss? And I would always say food every time, and they would laugh at me, and they and not in a like feel sorry for me way, but they always called me fat. And so when I would say that like I missed food, they literally said like it's just because you're fat. And now they all miss the food so bad. Like, they complain about it all the time, and I'm just like, I told you so. I told every one of them to put food in their suitcases instead of 6 pairs of high heels, and none of them listen to me. So
is it weird that their answer to you was it's because you're fat?
When I first moved there, it was really offensive. Like, ni hen pong was the first phrase that I learned, and that means you are fat. Because I just, like, heard it so much. So, as a younger child, like, I struggled with my weight, like, my entire life. I was bulimic for, like, 3 years. And so, moving to a country where everyone's, like, size 0 and they're so intense about losing weight was kind of hard until I decided that, even if I was super skinny, they would still find something that made me different, because I am different. I'm American and they're Chinese and I'm in China. So once I kind of like accepted that I was going to be different, it was so much fun, because I would just be like, yeah, well, you're skinny. So it was interesting.
So how are they enjoying all the chicken fried steaks here in Oklahoma?
They do not like the food at all. They don't like it. Most of them cook every night, but and they just pretty much, they don't even try the food anymore, which upsets me until I like look back on my time hop where it like shows what I was doing last year, and I see that I was like cooking food in my kitchen. So
your time hop on Facebook?
Yeah. So they just don't like the food. They like steak. Yeah, most of them like steak. So
there's enough of that.
Yeah. It's Oklahoma. They came to the right place.
Yeah. So you came back in July, and you talked a little bit about preparing to come home. Are there things that you miss about China?
I definitely miss being in a country where I was the minority. It was just like such an awesome experience. I miss that, and I miss some of the food, which is weird because I hated the food when I was there. But there's like a certain minority food in China, like one of the minorities in China, their food is amazing. And I love that food, and it's in New York City and LA. That's it. In
What's
the United
the minority?
States.
What is it?
I don't know. It's the western region of China. It's the people in China that are Muslim, and they have amazing food. It's so good.
What's the difference?
That it's bread based first. Well, it's like pita bread, I guess. I don't know, like the flat circle bread and yogurt and sheep and lots of meat, lots and lots and lots of meat. I love meat. And China, like on, I guess, traditional Chinese food is just like rice and noodles and vegetables and like 2 pieces of meat. So Chinese food is usually like soupy, and whereas that's just like meat and like solid, full formed vegetables. So I really like that food. And they use a lot of cumin. And I'd never realized what cumin was or anything, and I absolutely love it. And I can't find that food anywhere here. So that's upsetting. And I guess, like I said, I miss kind of the challenge of having something new every day. I mean, I could walk like 10 foot one direction and see something that I hadn't seen before or something that I didn't understand. Whereas here, it's just like the same thing.
So have your goals for your life changed from the time before you left China to coming back?
Absolutely. So growing up, well, up until I was like 15, I was set that I wanted my life to help people. That's what I wanted my life to be. When I hit 15 and everything went to hell in a handbasket, I said, I just want to make money. That's my goal in life, is to have as much money as possible and never have to live in my car. And I held from 15 to when I moved. Well, 15 to Cambodia. That was my goal. So after being in those countries and not even China, I mean, like Cambodia, parts of Malaysia, parts of Vietnam, places where there were like children in the streets without clothes that were super excited to get a hot dog. And that's when I realized I would never, ever, ever be happy just trying to make the most money possible. So I have like a war in my head that says, well, I don't want to end up like the rest of the people in my family and be struggling to feed myself, but also I don't want to end up just trying to make the most money possible and have a Lamborghini and like all this money in the world and never help anyone. So I don't know how I'm going to find that balance. So it definitely changed by leaps and bounds. So.
Do you have an idea what you want to do after you graduate with your career?
No. Because I have that ongoing battle in my head. On one side, I want to work for like Schooler or Tyson's or some big ag company and just try to climb the ladder and make a bunch of money. And on the other hand, I want to move to Cambodia and help improve rice production to feed children. So I don't know.
Do you have role models?
I guess my grandma. It's really hard for me to answer that question because my grandma is the person that she's the one that has made me want to help people. She's the reason that I know that I would never be happy not helping people and not having an impact. But on the other hand, she's also the reason that I know that I never, ever, ever want to have to depend on a man for anything or have to ask my 19-year-old granddaughter to send me money for food. So she's kind of both ways. I mean, if I could be like her, I would know that I did something with my life. But on the other hand, I wouldn't be like her for $1 million. So, I guess her. I don't know.
No, that's a loaded question. I was just curious if you thought about it. But that's a fair answer. So you know you're going to Costa Rica, and you're set to graduate. Remind me again, you told me last time.
December 2016.
So basically a year from now.
I've looked at grad schools because any international work basically requires a master's degree at least. And I know I want to be international, whatever I end up doing. So I've looked, there's a grad school in Germany that has a sustainable agriculture program that I've looked at. Mm-hmm. And then OSU has the Masters of International Ag. So those are the two that I'm looking at right now, but I have no idea. I really want to graduate in December and then backpack from like 2 hours after graduation to like 2 hours before classes start in August for whatever master's program I start. So
I hope you're able to do that. Where would you go?
I really have to go to countries in Africa. Like, after meeting all the people from Africa that I met, I just absolutely need to go there. And everyone thinks that I'm crazy, but I would absolutely love to do that. So I'm kind of thinking that I would backpack through there, whatever countries I can, which Wade is like my yes/no person. So if he says it's not safe, it's not safe. So I want to do that, and given the time, just like start at the bottom and go up. And I definitely have to go to Israel within like the next 2 years.
Why the next 2 years?
My grandma has always wanted to go to Israel, but she is scared of planes and she's scared of ships. I even told her that I would use like all the money I have saved, well, not all of it, but some of the money that I have saved, and take her to Israel. Like when she had a blood clot and they didn't think she was going to live, was like, we're going to Israel right now, because that's just something she's always wanted to do. She was like, no. She said, you can go and take pictures and bring it back and tell me about it. So I need to like do that quickly. But you can't, I've heard from people around campus that have traveled, that like if you go to Israel, then you can't get into Jordan or different countries in the Middle East if that stamps on your passport. So I think I'm going to go up from the bottom and then skip Israel, and then go to Greece, Italy, different countries on that side of Europe, and then go back to Israel and then come back, or go to Germany. So that's what I want to do.
It sounds like a plan to me.
So
I hope you make it.
I mean, you too.
I hope you make it. Well, is there anything else about China or your time at OSU that you want to talk about? Do you feel like we covered your China experience today?
Yeah. No, most of it.
Most of it?
Yeah.
It's hard to know it's hard to know what all's involved, because obviously I didn't live it.
Right.
But it's an interesting perspective. It'll be interesting for you to talk to your classmates, your Chinese classmates, at the end of their time here.
Yeah, they're here for 2 years.
Yeah.
So, which most of them are going back in Christmas. So that's the difference between me and them, is that they came in a group here, and also all of them are wealthy. So they can go home or like fly to Las Vegas or whatever they want to do, which I couldn't. So there's a difference there, but I'm really interested to talk to them when they come back.
There, Las Vegas is your Cambodia.
Yeah. So there's actually 5 of them are going to Las Vegas for Thanksgiving break for 2 days. And I was like, so was that expensive? And they were like, no, it's just like $500 a piece. And I was like, what? So that's interesting, their version of expensive versus mine.
It's true. All right, well, we will call it to an end here then.
Cool.
And I'm looking forward to talking to you again in 10 years after you're doing something exciting.
Hopefully after I backpacked in Africa.
That's right. Come check in. If you go, come check
Okay.
in.